class. As you can see, we are in our Blackboard classroom under the scales and proportion part of our Blackboard course content. I want you to find the assignment that I'm going to be discussing right now at the bottom of this page. As we come down, we can see the in-class Photoshop proportion assignment. This is where you'll be turning in this assignment. We see a little earlier version of this demoed assignment here on the screen. For the assignment, we can use Photoshop. You can also use digital art programs like Procreate or Fresco, or if you'd like, you can use an online Photoshop emulator called Photop. As you can see here, Photop is just photop.com. It doesn't serve quite as well as Photoshop, but it is a free Photoshop emulator that allows you to use .psd files within it. For this demonstration, I'm going to be using Photoshop, but a lot of the different content, a lot of the different tools are very similar across several of these different applications. We're going to be doing an image that looks a little like this one, though this is meant to be play. So we're going to be learning some stuff about Photoshop. You're going to be learning some stuff about creating proportional harmonies, but in the end, the image you're creating should be fun. So hopefully this is a fun assignment for you and doesn't take a tremendous amount of time either. So to start, we're going to create a new file. So I'm going to go up here and create a new file. The file that I'm going to be using is going to be 15 by 9 with 300 resolution. What do we know about the 15 by 9? Well, this is going to be our aspect ratio of 3:5, right? 3 times 3 is 9, 3 times 5 is 15. So this is the aspect ratio of 3:5. With the aspect ratio of 3:5, we know that this is getting very close to our golden ratio within the geometry of the height and the width of this image. Now for this project, all you really need to do is create a simple shape, and I'm going to use an ellipse, but for this project we could use any of the shapes that we see down here. We could use rectangle, triangle, polygon, even a custom shape would be fine. But for right now, I'm going to be using a simple ellipse. Let's talk about a few things that we see on screen. We see on screen that I have auto select layer turned on, and I have show transform controls turned on. If I turn that off, we lose those transform controls, and as we'll see later, we need those transform controls turned on. Something else that we might see is down here in my layers. So I have my layers showing. I have my background layer, and I have my foreground layer. Now within this foreground layer, or my layer that has the polygon on it, the ellipse on it, it's showing that I'm working with a vector image right now. For the purposes of this assignment, it would be better to work with a rasterized image or a pixelated image. So I'm going to come into this layer with a right click, and I'm going to rasterize that layer. Now, this isn't the shape that I'm going to be working on for the project, but I'm just going to do a quick little mini demo with this. So now that I have this image, this pink ellipse, I'm going to come up to one of these transform controls in the upper corner, and we see that I can change the scale. I can change the scale by any amount, but I'm going to change the scale right now by 150%. Now I've increased it by 150%, or I've taken it and well, you know what? I've stepped too far. Give me a second. I'm going to step back actually, and I got ahead of myself a little bit. My apologies. I'm going to take this, and first I want to copy this shape. I have a couple different ways of copying this shape. One way is by coming and hitting copy and hitting paste, or I could take and do that with a hotkeys, so my Command C and my Command V to make my copy. So I have my original shape here, and I have my duplicate of this shape, and I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to hit my transform controls, and actually with this I'm going to go down 50%. And now I have two shapes, but they are in a 2-to-1 relationship with one another. In fact, if I hit Enter, Control C, Control V, and if I did this again, instead of 100%, reducing this down by 50%, now we see that I have 3 ellipses, and each one of these are in relationship with each other by this proportion of this 2-to-1, or of this 50% proportion, the ratio of 2-to-1. That is the big idea within this assignment, is to create an overall composition by repeating a shape that has a particular harmony within that proportion. So I'm going to delete these layers, and I'm going to create my shape that I'm actually going to be working with for the composition. So again, I'm going to create an ellipse, but instead of a simple fill of color, I'm going to come up to the color, I'm going to select a pattern. There's a bunch of preset patterns, but I want to use one of my own here, this tessellation. And I'm going to reduce this down to an arbitrary amount that I kind of find visually appropriate. Excuse me. From here, I look at my layers over here, and I see that I have, I'm working with a vector image, so I'm going to rasterize that layer. And if I look at the overall image, I see this fairly plain background right now. I have my shape, has an interesting fill to it, but it's set within a fairly plain background. So my first step is going to be changing that, and I'm going to use something called background activation. Now you might remember background activation when we talked about the design principle of unity. To do this, I'm going to duplicate this image that I'm working with right now, and I'm going to increase the scale of this second ellipse. I want to start working with the golden ratio at this point, so I want to increase the scale of this based on the golden ratio. Now we might remember that the golden ratio is 1.618, but to increase with that, I'm going to make it into a percentage. So I'm going to use 161.8%. And now I've increased the scale of my second ellipse one time by the golden ratio. In fact, I'm going to do that twice. I'm going to increase this twice by that 161.8%. And I want to take this layer, right now this large shape is on my top layer. I'm going to drag that underneath my foreground shape. Now remember with background activation that one of the ways that we use that is by taking something that's in the foreground, repeating it in the background, but de-emphasizing that background shape, that background element. And to do that, I'm going to first take and I'm going to lower the opacity of that layer. We see that opacity control at the top of our layers, and that by itself is going to start de-emphasizing that background. And I also want to de-emphasize the color, the saturation, and so I'm going to remove some of the chroma. I'm going to do that by coming up to Image, Adjustments, down to Hue and Saturation, and we see within Hue and Saturation we see Hue, Saturation, and Lightness, or we can say Value there. And I want to take my saturation, and I'm going to reduce my saturation down so that I start to create a background activation. I can also do the same thing. Maybe I can increase the value a little bit to allow that to fall more in the background. Now I have a shape in the foreground and that background activation in the background, and I can start to play with the actual composition that I want to create here. Now I'm just modifying that angle a little bit. Well, what I'm going to do here is I'm going to duplicate this shape, and I'm going to start to change the scale of this second shape based on that golden ratio. Because I want to reduce the scale at this point, I'm going to go with 61.8%. And now I've reduced it down based on the golden ratio. I'm going to hit enter so that I can start working with this again. I'm going to hit Control C and then Control V to make my paste, copy and paste. And at this point, I'm going to again reduce this down by 61.8%. Now we see, as long as this is showing 61.8%, I can't copy and paste. I have to hit enter, and now I can copy and paste that again. Maybe I'll take a couple of these for my composition. I'm just creating my images that I'm going to be working with, my shapes I'm going to be working with. But let's take one of these and again reduce it down again by the golden ratio. So I'm going to select my transform controls, go up here 61.8%. And I think that's probably, hit enter, that's probably where I want to stop that reduction. I'm going to select that. I'm going to copy and paste it a few times. Now I have several of these smaller shapes. And at this point, I have an arrangement of this repeated shape, so I have unity through repetition, and I have variation based on scale. And within that variation based on scale, I have a proportional harmony. So from here, I want to create some variation, play with the composition, have some fun, and see if I can make a little bit more of a finished composition. I'm going to do most of that by simply moving these different shapes around. I'm going to change their angle, so a little bit of variation there. Remember, if I'm using the transform controls, I need to hit enter when I'm done each time. I'm going to allow some of them to overlap. And what we find is once we start overlapping these, we start losing figure-ground relationship. But I can restore some of that by coming over and using another tool that we have access to, which right now we see this little box that says normal. This is our blend options, and I'm going to change that blend option. And as I scroll down, we see this is how one layer is affecting the layer below it. And I'm just going to come and change several of these to create some additional visual interest. Just play. This is just simply play right now. No need to get too stressed about exactly how this is looking. Allow yourself just to play, have fun. Want to select that one, and I'm going to see about maybe there. Sure, that seems good. Okay, I want to make one more change, and that's I want to take this ellipse that I have selected, and I want to allow this to become the focal point. And I'm going to do that by coming back to my image. Excuse me, have to hit enter, image, adjustments, and back to my hue and saturation. And this time I'm going to change the hue within those colors. And as I scroll it over and get to some complementary colors to what's in the background, may even increase the saturation of that a little bit, we see that I start to create contrast emphasis. And so this is going to become a focal point for me. At this point, I feel pretty comfortable with the overall composition, and hit enter, make sure everything's locked in. And from here, I can collapse the layers. I have a lot of options, but what I would like you to do is I'd like you to save this. First, save it as a PDF. Sorry, as a PSD. Excuse me. So we're going to save as. This is asking if I want to save it on the cloud. I'm going to select on my computer. Yep, save on the computer. Sorry about all that. So this is, for me, that's going to be demo portion Photoshop, and I'll go ahead and throw 13 in there. And so this is being saved as a PSD. That's going to preserve all of these different layers. And then what I want you to turn in is a JPEG. So we're going to save as, or we can export as. And I want to export this as a JPEG. We see that our name is going to stay the same. We're going to hit export, hit save, and that is what I want you to turn in. And that will be turning that JPEG into the in-class Photoshop proportion assignment. Thank you, everyone. Hopefully that was refreshing some of the information I provided in previous demos that we looked at Photoshop. But obviously, if you have any questions, or if you find that this assignment becomes just very difficult to complete on this Monday, feel free to bring it up and we can look at it again come Wednesday. Thank you, everyone.